A boy walks into school wearing the same faded shirt. Again. The laughter cuts like knives. The whispers sting. He's humiliated in front of everyone. But then it happens. The daughter of the richest man in town stands up, silencing the bullies. She doesn't care about money or status, only what's right. Their bond grows stronger. But soon, powerful forces push back, because the billionaire father won't allow his daughter to be seen with the mechanic's son. And when pride and prejudice collide, the truth no one expected comes crashing out. Will compassion be enough to break through walls of wealth and judgment? Or will this unlikely friendship be torn apart before it even begins? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The pale morning light crept through the threadbare curtains of the Carter home, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Ethan Carter stood in the small kitchen, the coffee maker gurgling as he prepared a simple breakfast of toast and eggs. The ancient appliance wheezed and sputtered, much like the cars he fixed at his shop, but it still got the job done. "Liam!" he called out, his voice carrying down the narrow hallway. "Time to get up, buddy!" No response came from his son's room. Ethan sighed, knowing the morning struggle that lay ahead. He wiped his calloused hands on his work pants and walked to Liam's door, knocking gently. "Come on, champ. Can't be late for school today." Inside the small bedroom, Liam buried himself deeper under his blanket, a fortress against the morning and what waited at school. His father's footsteps creaked on the old floorboards as he entered the room. "I don't feel good," Liam mumbled from beneath his cover. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. "That's what you said yesterday, and the day before." He pulled back the blanket to reveal Liam's troubled face. "What's really going on?" Liam's eyes darted to the small pile of clothes on his chair, the same few shirts and pants he rotated through each week. His gaze lingered on the blue t-shirt he'd worn 3 times already, its color faded from countless washes. "Nothing," Liam said quickly, but his father caught the slight tremor in his voice. Ethan followed his son's gaze to the clothes and felt that familiar ache in his chest. He knew what new clothes cost. He'd checked the prices at the department store just last weekend. Between the mortgage, utilities, and keeping food on the table, there wasn't enough left for extras, not even for something as simple as a new shirt for his growing boy. "The blue one's still clean," Ethan said softly, trying to sound encouraging. "And it's your favorite, right?" Liam sat up slowly, his shoulders slumped. "It was my favorite last year." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He watched as Liam trudged to the chair and picked up the shirt, its worn fabric hanging loosely in his small hands. "Tell you what," Ethan said, forcing brightness into his voice. "How about eggs this morning? Made them just the way you like." Liam nodded without enthusiasm, pulling the shirt over his head. Ethan noticed how the collar was starting to stretch, how the hem that used to hit at his waist now rode up above his belly button when he raised his arms. In the kitchen, Liam picked at his breakfast while Ethan tried to maintain cheerful conversation. "Maybe we can work on that science project tonight? The one about the solar system?" "Yeah, maybe," Liam replied, pushing his eggs around his plate. Ethan checked his watch. He'd need to leave for the shop soon. The morning rush would be starting, and he couldn't afford to lose any customers. Every dollar counted these days. "Dad?" Liam's voice was barely above a whisper. "What is it, buddy? Do you think?" Liam hesitated, then shook his head. "Never mind." Ethan knew what his son wanted to ask. The same question hung in the air every morning lately. He reached across the table and squeezed Liam's shoulder. "Things will get better, I promise. The shop's picking up, and once we catch up on some bills." But Liam's eyes had already dulled, the hope fading before it could take root. He'd heard these promises before. After breakfast, Ethan watched as Liam packed his backpack, carefully avoiding looking at himself in the hallway mirror. The boy's movements were mechanical, resigned, as he slipped on his worn sneakers and headed for the door. "Have a good day at school," Ethan called out, hating how helpless he felt. "I love you, buddy." "Love you too, Dad," Liam replied, but his voice was distant, already preparing for what waited at school. Ethan stood at the window, watching his son's small figure make its way down the street. Liam's shoulders were hunched, his backpack hanging low, as if the weight of his situation was physically pressing down on him. The walk to school seemed to take forever for Liam. Each step brought him closer to the stairs, the whispers, the sideways glances from classmates in their new clothes. He tried to make himself smaller, to become invisible, but it never worked. The school building loomed ahead, its brick walls seeming more like a prison than a place of learning. Other kids streamed past him, their clothes bright and new, their laughter carefree. Liam kept his eyes on the ground, counting the cracks in the sidewalk to distract himself. Inside, the hallways buzzed with morning chatter. Liam made his way to his classroom, clutching his backpack straps tight against his chest. Maybe today would be different. Maybe nobody would notice. But as he stepped through the classroom door, the familiar hush fell over the room. Then came the whispers, like little paper cuts to his confidence. "Look, Carter's wearing that shirt again. Doesn't he own anything else? My mom says his dad can't even afford new clothes." Liam's cheeks burned hot as he slid into his seat. He could feel their eyes on him, hear their barely contained laughter. The blue shirt that had once been his favorite now felt like a spotlight, drawing attention to everything he wished he could hide. Ms. Thompson was writing the day's schedule on the board, oblivious to the quiet torment taking place behind her. Liam pulled out his notebook, trying to focus on the words appearing on the whiteboard, but they blurred through the tears he refused to let fall. A paper airplane landed on his desk, and his heart sank. He didn't need to open it to know what it would say. Something cruel, something that would stick in his mind all day. He pushed it off his desk, watching it flutter to the floor like a fallen hope. The classroom clock ticked loudly, each second stretching out like an hour. Liam hunched lower in his seat, wishing he could disappear into the faded blue fabric of his shirt. He thought about his dad, working hard at the shop, trying his best to make things better. But right now, sitting in a classroom full of judgment and mockery, better, seemed impossibly far away. The whispers continued, a steady undercurrent to the morning routine. Liam felt the familiar sting of shame creeping up his neck, coloring his cheeks a deeper red. He closed his eyes briefly, trying to remember his father's words from breakfast, "Things will get better," but the promise rang hollow against the reality of his classmates' cruel laughter. The double doors of Pine Valley Middle School's auditorium creaked open as students filed in for the special assembly. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust particles that danced in the air. The room buzzed with excited chatter as kids found their seats on the hard plastic chairs arranged in neat rows. Liam Carter shuffled in with his head down, clutching his worn backpack close to his chest like a shield. His faded blue t-shirt, washed so many times the color had nearly disappeared, felt like a spotlight on his back. He spotted an empty seat near the middle section and made his way there, trying to be invisible. "Hey, look who it is!" Travis Miller's voice cut through the noise. "It's Raggedy Liam wearing his favorite shirt again." A few students nearby snickered. Liam's shoulders hunched further as he slid into his seat, his face burning. He could hear Travis and his friends whispering and laughing behind him. "Maybe his dad can't afford a washing machine," someone muttered just loud enough for Liam to hear. More giggles followed. Principal Matthews stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone. "Good morning, students. Today we're here to discuss our upcoming spring fair." But Liam couldn't focus on the words. All he could hear was the constant whispers around him. Someone flicked a paper ball at his head. He didn't turn around, knowing it would only make things worse. "Raggedy Liam, Raggedy Liam," Travis chanted under his breath, just quiet enough that the teachers couldn't hear. A few more voices joined in. Liam's fingers traced the worn hem of his shirt. He remembered how proud his dad had been when he'd found it at the thrift store, saying the blue matched Liam's eyes. Now it just felt like a target on his back. The assembly droned on. Principal Matthews discussed fundraising goals and volunteer opportunities. In the front row, teachers nodded along, oblivious to the quiet torment happening in the middle section. "I bet he sleeps in that shirt too," someone whispered. "Probably can't take it off. It's stuck to him," another voice added. Liam blinked hard, trying to hold back tears. He thought about his dad, working late at the auto shop, coming home with grease-stained hands and tired eyes, but always managing a smile. It wasn't fair that people made fun of them just because they didn't have much money. Travis leaned forward in his seat, his breath hot on Liam's neck. "Hey, Raggedy Liam, My little sister has some dress-up clothes she doesn't want anymore. Maybe you can have those instead?" More snickers rippled through the nearby seats. Liam's hands trembled as he gripped his backpack tighter. Principal Matthews was now talking about the importance of school spirit. "Remember, students, we're all part of the Pine Valley family." "Family?" Travis scoffed quietly. "More like charity case." The words stung like physical blows. Liam tried to make himself smaller in his seat, wishing he could disappear completely. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed too bright, the room too crowded, the air too thick. A girl, 2 rows ahead, turned around to stare at him, then whispered something to her friend. They both giggled behind their hands. Liam recognized them from his math class. They usually ignored him, but apparently today they'd joined in the fun of tormenting him. The assembly was nearly over when Travis made his final move. He reached forward and grabbed the back of Liam's shirt, giving it a sharp yank. The sudden force made Liam jerk backward, and he heard a small ripping sound. "Oops," Travis said with fake innocence. "Maybe it'll fall apart completely. Then you'll have to get a new one." Liam's vision blurred with tears he desperately tried to hold back. His chin quivered as he reached behind to feel if his shirt had actually torn. The whole room seemed to spin around him as laughter bubbled up from the surrounding seats. "Stop it, right now." The clear, commanding voice cut through the laughter like a knife. The entire section fell silent as Amelia Sterling rose from her seat several rows ahead. She turned around, her long dark hair swinging with the motion, and fixed Travis with a stern glare. Everyone knew Amelia. Her father owned half the businesses in town, including the shopping mall and the new sports complex. But unlike many wealthy kids, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that commanded respect. "What you're doing isn't funny," she continued, her voice firm and unwavering. "It's cruel, and it needs to stop." Travis's face reddened. "I was just joking around." "No," Amelia cut him off. "You were being a bully, and if I see you or anyone else bothering Liam again, I'll make sure Principal Matthews knows exactly what's been happening during assemblies." The threat hung in the air. Even Principal Matthews had paused his speech, noticing the commotion in the middle section. The entire auditorium seemed to hold its breath as Amelia Sterling, daughter of the most powerful man in town, stood up for the mechanic's son. The assembly hall emptied slowly as students filed out into the bright afternoon sunshine. Liam stayed in his seat, waiting until most of his classmates had left. His hands were still shaking from what had happened earlier. The memory of Travis yanking his shirt made his stomach twist into knots. "Are you okay?" a gentle voice asked. Liam looked up to find Amelia Sterling standing next to his row. Her long brown hair was neatly tied back with a ribbon that matched her crisp school uniform. She wasn't smiling exactly, but her face showed genuine concern. Yeah," Liam mumbled, surprised she was even talking to him. Everyone knew who Amelia was. Her father owned half the buildings in town. She could have been hanging out with any of the popular kids, but here she was, waiting for him. "Those guys were really mean," Amelia said, adjusting her backpack strap. "Want to walk outside together?" Liam nodded, gathering his things. As they made their way down the aisle, he noticed how other students watched them with curious eyes. No one dared say anything now, not after Amelia had stood up to Travis. The afternoon sun warmed their faces as they stepped outside. A light breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming cherry trees from the school courtyard. Liam kept glancing at Amelia, still not quite believing she was walking with him. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what you did in there." "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Amelia replied firmly. "Travis thinks he can push everyone around just because his parents buy him expensive stuff. It's not right." They reached a wooden bench near the pickup area, and Amelia sat down, patting the space next to her. Liam hesitated for a moment before joining her. "I like your shirt, by the way," Amelia said, surprising him again. "Blue is my favorite color." Liam tugged self-consciously at the worn fabric. "It's old," he admitted. "Dad says we'll get new ones soon when—" "My mom used to say clothes don't make the person," Amelia interrupted gently. "She said what matters is how you treat others." "Used to?" Liam asked before he could stop himself. A shadow crossed Amelia's face. "She passed away 3 years ago." Oh, Liam's throat felt tight. My mom died too. Last year. They sat in understanding silence for a moment, two kids who knew what it meant to miss someone so much it hurt. A yellow butterfly fluttered past, landing briefly on a nearby flower. Do you like music? Amelia asked suddenly. I heard you humming in art class last week. You have a really nice voice. Liam felt his cheeks warm. Mom taught me to sing, he said. She knew lots of songs. That's amazing! Maybe you could teach me sometime? Amelia's eyes lit up with genuine interest. For the first time that day, Liam felt himself smile. They talked about their favorite songs, and Amelia told him about the piano lessons she took. She didn't act at all like he expected a rich person's daughter to act. She listened when he spoke and laughed at his jokes about their grumpy math teacher. A familiar rumble of an engine made Liam look up. His dad's old pickup truck was pulling into the school driveway. The blue paint faded and scratched, but the engine purring smoothly thanks to Dad's mechanical skills. That's my dad, Liam said, standing up. He felt suddenly nervous about Ethan seeing him with Amelia. I'll walk with you, Amelia offered, falling into step beside him. Ethan Carter climbed out of the truck, still wearing his work clothes with the Carter's Auto Repair logo on the pocket. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Liam walking with Amelia Sterling, but his expression remained polite. Hi, Mr. Carter, Amelia said brightly. I'm Amelia. Liam and I were just talking about music. Nice to meet you, Amelia, Ethan replied carefully, nodding in her direction. He looked at Liam, noting the small smile on his son's face, something he hadn't seen in weeks. See you tomorrow, Liam. Amelia waved as she headed toward the line of expensive cars where other parents waited. Liam climbed into the passenger seat of the truck, still feeling warm from the unexpected friendship. Ethan started the engine, glancing at his son, and then at Amelia's retreating figure. The daughter of James Sterling, the wealthiest man in town, befriending his boy? He wasn't sure what to make of it. The truck pulled away from the school, leaving behind the cherry blossoms and the lingering warmth of an unexpected act of kindness. In the passenger seat, Liam hummed softly, a habit he'd picked up from his mother, while Ethan drove in thoughtful silence, wondering what this new development might mean for his son. The evening sun cast long shadows through the open garage door of Carter's Auto Repair. The familiar scent of motor oil and grease filled the small shop as Ethan worked underneath a beat-up Honda Civic. Tools clinked against concrete as he reached for a wrench, his weathered hands steady with years of practice. Dad! Dad! Liam's voice echoed through the garage. The sound of his running footsteps made Ethan smile beneath the car. Careful there, buddy. No running in the shop, remember? Ethan called out, sliding out from under the vehicle. He sat up on the creeper and wiped his hands on an old rag. Liam bounced on his toes, practically vibrating with excitement. Sorry, Liam said, but his grin didn't fade. But Dad, you won't believe what happened today. Amelia Sterling stood up for me when Travis was being mean. She told him to stop, right in front of everyone. Ethan's smile faltered slightly. He stood up slowly, his joints protesting after hours of work. Amelia Sterling? Richard Sterling's daughter? Yeah. She was so nice, Dad. She walked with me after the assembly and everything. Liam's eyes shone with admiration. She said, if anyone bothers me again, I should tell her. Ethan sighed, hanging the rag on a nearby tool chest. That's nice of her, son. But listen, rich kids like that, they don't usually stick around long. Best not to get your hopes up. Liam's face fell. But she's different, Dad. She's not like the other kids who make fun of me. I know you want to believe that, Ethan said gently, placing a hand on Liam's shoulder. Just be careful, okay? People like the Sterlings, they live in a different world than us. But why don't you start on your homework? Ethan suggested, changing the subject. You can use my office desk. I've got to finish up Mrs. Peterson's car before closing. Liam's shoulders slumped as he trudged toward the small office, his earlier excitement deflated. Ethan watched him go, feeling that familiar ache in his chest. He hated dampening his son's spirits, but he'd learned the hard way that getting your hopes up only led to disappointment. The next couple of hours passed in a blur of oil changes and brake repairs. Ethan worked steadily, the routine tasks helping him focus on something other than the worry gnawing at him. The sun had almost set when he finally started cleaning up, putting tools back in their proper places and sweeping the floor. Liam had finished his homework and was now sitting on an old chair, quietly humming to himself while drawing in his notebook. The sound reminded Ethan so much of Sarah, Liam's mother, that it made his heart catch. She used to hum the same way when she was concentrated on something. "Almost done here, buddy," Ethan called out. "Just need to lock up, and we can head home for dinner." He was just about to close the big garage door when the sound of footsteps made him turn around. A girl in a neat school uniform stood in the entrance, holding a covered plate in her hands. The fading sunlight caught her hair, and Ethan recognized her immediately, Amelia Sterling. "Mr. Carter?" she said politely. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Dad, look, it's Amelia." Liam jumped up from his chair, his face lighting up. Ethan straightened, suddenly conscious of his grease-stained coveralls and dirty hands. "Miss Sterling, can I help you with something?" Amelia stepped forward, holding out the plate. "Actually, I wanted to thank you. You fixed my mom's car a few months ago, the Mercedes with the transmission problem. You charged us way less than the dealership wanted, and it's been running perfectly ever since." Ethan remembered the car. He'd known the dealership was trying to oversell repairs the vehicle didn't need. "Just doing my job," he said carefully. "Well, my mom and I made these cookies to say thank you," Amelia continued, removing the cloth covering to reveal a pile of chocolate chip cookies. "They're still warm." "Wow," Liam exclaimed, coming closer to look at the treats. "You baked these yourself?" Amelia nodded, smiling at him. "My mom taught me her secret recipe. Would you like one?" Before Ethan could protest, Liam had already accepted a cookie, his eyes widening as he took a bite. "Dad, these are amazing." Ethan stood there, completely caught off guard by this gesture. He'd fixed hundreds of cars over the years, but no one had ever brought him homemade cookies as a thank you, especially not someone from the Sterling family. "That's very thoughtful of you," he managed to say. "But you didn't have to." "We wanted to," Amelia interrupted gently. "Mom says honest mechanics are hard to find, and we really appreciated your help." She set the plate down on a nearby workbench. "Please take them. They're better fresh anyway." The youth shelter stood like a beacon of hope on Cherry Street, its faded red bricks warmed by the afternoon sun. Liam hesitated at the entrance, clutching his backpack straps. He'd been here before on days when his dad worked late, but something about today felt different. Mrs. Peterson, the shelter's coordinator, greeted him with her usual warm smile. Her gray hair was tied back in a neat bun, and her flowery apron had traces of what looked like today's lunch special. "Hello there, Liam. Come on in, sweetheart. We've got something special happening in the reading room today." Liam followed her through the familiar hallway, past the dining area where volunteers were clearing away lunch dishes. The sound of young voices and gentle laughter drifted from the reading room. As he rounded the corner, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, sitting cross-legged on a colorful reading mat, was Amelia Sterling. She held a picture book in her hands, surrounded by a half-dozen younger kids who watched her with rapt attention. Her voice changed with each character in the story, making the little ones giggle. "And then," the tiny mouse said. Amelia squeaked in a high-pitched voice, causing a burst of laughter from her audience. Liam stood frozen in the doorway. "Amelia Sterling? The daughter of the richest man in town was here at the shelter?" He watched as she turned the page with careful fingers, showing the pictures to the children clustered around her. One of the younger kids spotted him. "Liam!" little Sophie called out, waving enthusiastically. Her missing front teeth made her smile even bigger. Amelia looked up, her face brightening. "Liam, I didn't know you came here too." She closed the book gently, marking her place with a bookmark. "Would you like to join us? We're just getting to the good part." The younger kid scooted over, making room for him on the reading mat. Liam moved forward slowly, still processing the scene before him. He'd always thought of Amelia as living in a different world, one of mansion gates and fancy cars. Yet here she was, sitting on the worn carpet of the shelter's reading room, like she belonged there. "I come here most afternoons," Liam said quietly, settling down next to Sophie. "My dad works late sometimes at the shop." Amelia nodded, understanding in her eyes. I try to come 3 times a week. These guys are the best audience for stories." She ruffled Tommy's hair, making the 6-year-old beam with pride. As Amelia continued reading, Liam noticed how natural she was with the younger kids. She didn't talk down to them or act superior. Instead, she listened to their interruptions patiently, answered their questions, and made each child feel special. When story time ended, the younger kids scattered to other activities. Amelia and Liam helped Mrs. Peterson arrange the cushions and put away the books. "How long have you been volunteering here?" Liam asked, shelving a stack of picture books. Amelia straightened a row of novels before answering. "Almost a year now. Ever since." She paused, her fingers lingering on the spine of a book. "Ever since my mom passed away." Liam's hand froze mid-reach for another book. "Your mom?" he said softly. Amelia nodded, her eyes distant but warm with memory. "She used to bring me here when I was little. She always said that true wealth wasn't about having things, it was about giving to others." She smiled, though her eyes glistened slightly. She would spend hours here, reading to kids, helping with homework, or just listening to people who needed someone to talk to. "I didn't know," Liam said quietly. He thought about his own mom, gone for 3 years now. The ache in his chest felt familiar. "She taught me that everyone has a story worth hearing," Amelia continued, moving to straighten the reading mat. "And that kindness isn't something you do for show, it's something you practice every day, even when no one's watching." "Is that why you helped me at the assembly?" Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Amelia turned to face him fully. "I helped you because it was right, Liam. Those kids were being cruel, and that's never okay. My mom would have done the same thing." Looking at Amelia now, Liam saw past the designer clothes and famous last name. He saw someone who, like him, knew what it meant to miss a mother's love. Someone who chose to honor that love by sharing it with others. Mrs. Peterson appeared in the doorway with a plate of cookies. "Who's ready for a snack? Fresh from the oven." As they sat together at one of the small tables, sharing warm cookies and cold milk, Liam watched Amelia chat easily with the other shelter kids who came and went. She knew all their names, asked about their days, and listened to their stories with genuine interest. Tommy came running up, proudly showing them a drawing he'd made. "Look, it's from the story." "That's beautiful, Tommy," Amelia exclaimed, examining the colorful scribbles with serious attention. "I love how you made the mouse's house so big and cozy." "Can you read us another story later?" Sophie asked, cookie crumbs dotting her chin. "Of course," Amelia promised, handing her a napkin with a gentle smile. "I think we should let Liam pick the next one. He might know some good ones we haven't heard yet." Liam felt warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the cookies. For the first time since his mom died, he felt like he'd found a place where he truly belonged, and a friend who understood him completely. Mrs. Peterson watched from her desk, a knowing smile on her face as she observed the unlikely pair, the billionaire's daughter and the mechanic's son, bonding over books and cookies in her little shelter. Sometimes, she thought, the best connections came from the most unexpected places. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual lunchtime chaos. Plastic trays clattered, milk cartons shuffled, and hundreds of conversations merged into a constant hum. Liam sat alone at his usual corner table, picking at his peanut butter sandwich, when a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Is this seat taken?" Liam looked up to find Amelia Sterling standing there, her lunch tray balanced carefully in her hands. She wore a neat blue cardigan, and her dark hair was pulled back with a matching ribbon, but her warm smile was the same as at the shelter yesterday. Liam glanced around nervously. "Are you sure you want to sit here?" "Of course." Amelia placed her tray down and slid onto the bench beside him. "Unless you'd rather eat alone?" No, Liam said quickly. "It's just—" His voice trailed off as he noticed heads turning in their direction. At the popular table across the room, Madison Walker's mouth dropped open in shock. She whispered something to Trevor Barnes, who snickered and passed the message along. Soon, a wave of whispers rippled through the cafeteria, like a stone dropped in still water. "Just ignore them," Amelia said firmly, opening her yogurt. "So, tell me more about that book you were reading to the little kids yesterday. The one about the dragon?" Liam's face brightened. "Oh yeah, It's really cool. The dragon doesn't want to fight knights or steal treasure. He just wants to grow a garden and make friends with the village people." As they talked about books and dragons, Liam gradually relaxed. But he couldn't help noticing how the whispers grew louder, how kids walked past their tables slowly to stare, how phones came out to snap quick pictures. "That's the Sterling girl," he heard someone say. "What's she doing with him?" "Daddy's probably making her do charity work," another voice sneered. "My mom says his dad can barely keep their lights on." Amelia acted like she couldn't hear any of it, asking Liam about his favorite subjects and telling funny stories about her puppy's latest adventures. But Liam saw how her shoulders tensed slightly when particularly loud whispers reached them. The cafeteria monitor, Mrs. Peterson, kept walking past their table with a worried frown. On her third pass, she paused. "Everything all right here, children?" "We're fine, thank you," Amelia answered politely but firmly. The afternoon classes were worse. In math, Liam felt eyes boring into his back. Notes were passed, followed by poorly hidden giggles. During art class, nobody would share supplies with him at his table, except Amelia, who pointedly moved her chair closer and offered him her best colored pencils. By the last period, even the teachers were acting strange. Mr. Roberts stumbled over Liam's name during attendance, something he'd never done before. Ms. D. Campbell assigned group work but quickly separated Liam and Amelia when they tried to pair up. Just before the final bell, Mrs. Turner, Liam's homeroom teacher, called him to stay behind. Her normally cheerful face looked pinched with worry as the other students filed out. Amelia lingered at the door until Mrs. Turner politely but firmly asked her to leave. "Liam?" Mrs. Turner began, perching on the edge of her desk. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "You're a wonderful student, and I've always appreciated your quiet presence in class." Liam's stomach clenched. Nothing good ever came from conversations that started this way. "But I need to speak with you about your new friendship with Amelia Sterling." She sighed. "Several parents have expressed concerns today. They feel that perhaps this association might not be in either of your best interests." Liam stared at his scuffed sneakers. "We're just friends," he mumbled. "I understand that, dear, but you must realize that the Sterlings are very prominent in our community. There are certain expectations." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes it's kinder to recognize these social differences before anyone gets hurt." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Liam sat silent, his chest tight with shame and anger. He thought about Amelia reading to the shelter kids, about her defending him at the assembly, about her sharing her lunch and colored pencils. None of that had anything to do with money, or social status, or expectations. Mrs. Turner leaned forward, her voice gentler. "I'm only telling you this because I care about your well-being, Liam. There's already talk of taking this to the principal, and I'd hate to see you caught in the middle of any unpleasantness." The warning hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Liam nodded numbly, just wanting to escape. The last bell had rung several minutes ago. His dad would be waiting outside in the old pickup truck, probably worried about what was keeping him. "You can go now," Mrs. Turner said softly. "Just please think about what I've said." Liam grabbed his backpack and hurried toward the door. Behind him, he heard Mrs. Turner call out, "And Liam, sometimes it's best to stick with friends who understand our own situation better." He didn't look back as he left the classroom, his eyes burning with unshed tears. The hallway stretched empty before him, his footsteps echoing against the rows of metal lockers. Through the windows, he could see other kids climbing into shiny SUVs or walking home in laughing groups. Somewhere among them was Amelia, probably already dealing with her own version of this conversation. His dad's rusty pickup waited in the nearly empty parking lot, looking more out of place than ever among the few remaining luxury cars. As Liam walked toward it, the weight of Mrs. Turner's words seemed to press down on his shoulders, making each step harder than the last. The grand mahogany doors of the Sterling mansion creaked open as Amelia stepped inside, her footsteps echoing across the polished marble floor. The chandelier above cast dancing shadows through its crystal prisms, but the usual warmth of home felt strangely absent today. Amelia. her father's stern voice carried from his study. "Come here, please." She found Charles Sterling standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his tall frame silhouetted against the setting sun. He didn't turn around as she entered, his hands clasped behind his back in that familiar way that always meant serious business. "Yes, father?" Amelia's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I received some concerning calls today." He finally turned to face her, his expression grave. "From several parents at your school, about your new friend." Amelia's heart sank, but she lifted her chin. "You mean Liam? He's a wonderful person, father. If you just meet him." "This isn't about meeting him," Charles cut her off, moving to sit behind his massive desk. "This is about appearances, Amelia, about maintaining the standards that come with the Sterling name." "But that's not fair." The words burst out before she could stop them. "Liam is kind and smart. The only reason people are mean to him is because his family doesn't have money." "Lower your voice," Charles warned. "You're a Sterling. We have a reputation to uphold in this community. People look to us as an example." Mom would have stood up for him. Amelia's voice trembled. "She always taught me that kindness matters more than money." Her father's face tightened at the mention of her mother. He drummed his fingers on the desk, a habit that surfaced whenever he was controlling his temper. "Your mother had a beautiful heart. But she also understood the importance of proper social circles." "That's not true." Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes. "Mom volunteered at shelters. She helped everyone, no matter who they were. She's the reason I started volunteering too." "Charity work is one thing," Charles said firmly. "But spending your school days with the mechanic's son? Having the entire town gossip about how a Sterling is lowering herself? That stops now." Amelia's hands balled into fists at her sides. "Liam gets bullied every single day. He wears the same clothes because his dad can barely afford food. He needs a friend. Then he can find one in his own social circle." Charles stood up, his tone final. "I forbid you from spending any more time with that boy. Is that clear?" "But father, is that clear, Amelia?" She stared at him, her heart pounding. The study suddenly felt suffocating, despite its high ceilings and expensive furnishings. Everything around her, the oil paintings, the leather-bound books, the antique globe, seemed to mock the simplicity of Liam's worn backpack and faded shirts. "Answer me, young lady." "Yes, sir," she whispered. But her mind was already racing ahead to what she needed to do. "You may go to your room now." Amelia turned and walked out slowly, careful to close the study door with proper restraint, despite wanting to slam it. She climbed the curved staircase to her bedroom, each step heavy with defiance. Once inside her pink and white bedroom, she collapsed onto her window seat, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The manicured gardens below blurred through her tears. Her mother's favorite roses swayed in the evening breeze, and Amelia could almost hear her gentle voice. "Always lead with your heart, sweetheart." She pulled out her phone, fingers shaking slightly as she typed. "Liam, my dad just told me I'm not supposed to be friends with you anymore. But I want you to know something. I don't care what he says. You're my friend, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure something out. Promise." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then hugged her knees to her chest. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, but all she could think about was the quiet strength in Liam's eyes when he read to those shelter kids, and how his whole face lit up when someone actually took the time to listen to him. Her phone buzzed with Liam's reply. "You don't have to get in trouble for me." Amelia typed back quickly. "You're worth it. Friends stick together, no matter what." She sat there in the growing darkness, watching the stars emerge one by one. Her father's voice drifted up from somewhere downstairs, probably on another important business call. But for the first time in her life, Amelia knew with absolute certainty that he was wrong about something. Her mother had always told her that true friendship was rare and precious, more valuable than any amount of money. Looking down at her phone, at Liam's worried response and her own fierce promise, Amelia knew she was making the right choice. No matter what her father said, no matter what anyone at school whispered, she wouldn't abandon her friend. Steam rose from 2 bowls of mac and cheese on the small kitchen table where Ethan and Liam sat. The overhead light flickered occasionally. Another repair Ethan needed to get to when he had the time. Their ancient refrigerator hummed loudly in the background, its familiar drone a constant companion to their evening meals. "Dad?" Liam pushed his food around with his fork, his eyes fixed on his phone sitting next to his plate. "Amelia sent me a message." Ethan paused mid-bite, carefully setting down his spoon. "Oh?" He tried to keep his voice neutral, but worry crept into his chest. "What did she say?" "She promised she'd still be my friend, no matter what." Liam's face brightened as he spoke, but then clouded over. "She said her dad told her to stay away from me, but she doesn't care what he thinks." Ethan rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. The cheap fluorescent light cast harsh shadows across their worn tablecloth, the same one they'd had since before Liam's mother passed. "Buddy, sometimes things are more complicated than they seem, but why?" Liam's voice cracked slightly. "Amelia's different from the other rich kids. She's nice to everyone at the shelter, not just me, and she brings books for the little kids, and everything." "I know she's been kind," Ethan said carefully, reaching across to touch his son's hand. "But people like Mr. Sterling, they have a lot of power in this town. He owns half the businesses here, including the building where our shop is." Liam's eyes widened. "He wouldn't make us move, would he?" "I don't know, Bud." Ethan's throat tightened. "But he could raise our rent, or maybe some of my customers who work for him might suddenly stop coming by. These things, they can happen in subtle ways." "That's not fair." Liam pushed his bowl away, his voice rising. "We didn't do anything wrong." "No, we didn't." Ethan stood up and walked to the sink, gripping its edge until his knuckles turned white. The dishes from breakfast still sat there. He'd been too busy at the shop to wash them. "But life isn't always fair, Liam. Sometimes we have to be careful. Mom wouldn't want us to give up on a friend just because some rich guy said so." Liam's words hit Ethan like a physical blow. "She always said true friends stick together." Ethan turned back to face his son, seeing the stubborn set of his jaw so much like his mother's. "Your mom was right about a lot of things," he said softly, "but she also understood about protecting the people you love." "Amelia protects me," Liam insisted. "When those kids were making fun of my clothes, she stood up for me." "Nobody else did that, Dad. Nobody." Ethan sank back into his chair, the weight of the day heavy on his shoulders. The mac and cheese had gone cold, but neither of them seemed interested in eating anymore. Through their small kitchen window, he could see the neighbor's security light clicking on, casting a harsh glow across their patched-up fence. "I know she did, buddy, and that meant a lot to both of us." Ethan reached over and squeezed Liam's shoulder. "But sometimes the kindest thing we can do for someone is to step back. We don't want Amelia getting in trouble with her father because of us." Liam's lower lip trembled. "But what if she needs us too? She told me about her mom today, how they used to volunteer together at the shelter before she got sick. Amelia goes there now, because it makes her feel close to her mom." He looked up at Ethan with wet eyes. "Just like how I sing, because it reminds me of Mom." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Ethan felt his resolve wavering. He'd never known about Amelia's mother, or why the girl spent so much time at the shelter. It painted her kindness in a different light. Not charity, but understanding. "Finish your dinner, Bud," Ethan finally said, his voice gentle. "We'll figure this out." Later that night, after the dishes were done and Liam had gone to bed, Ethan stood in his son's doorway. Moonlight filtered through the thin curtains, illuminating Liam's peaceful face as he slept. His phone sat on the nightstand, probably still holding Amelia's message of friendship and defiance. Ethan watched his son's chest rise and fall, remembering all the nights he'd stood in this same spot, wondering if he was doing enough as a father. The worn edges of Liam's blanket, the scratched bedside table, the hand-me-down clothes, carefully folded on his chair, every sign of their poverty stood out in sharp relief. But there was something else in this room too. A small stack of books Amelia had lent Liam, carefully placed on his desk. A drawing they'd made together at the shelter, showing 3 stick figures, 2 small and 1 tall, all holding hands. These weren't the actions of someone looking down on them or offering pity. They were tokens of genuine friendship. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, torn between his instinct to protect his son from inevitable heartbreak and his desire to let Liam hold on to this precious connection. He knew the struggles that lay ahead, the whispers, the prejudice, the potential consequences. But he also knew the pain of loneliness, of being judged for things beyond your control. In the quiet darkness, watching his son sleep peacefully, despite the weight of the world pressing down on their small family, Ethan felt the full impact of their situation. This wasn't just about a friendship anymore. It was about standing up to the invisible walls that people like Mr. Sterling built to keep families like theirs in their place. The morning sun painted long shadows across the quiet streets as Amelia Sterling slipped out her front door. She adjusted her backpack, careful not to let it thump against the expensive wood. Her father was still asleep, and the last thing she needed was him discovering her early departure. The dewy grass dampened her shoes as she cut across her family's manicured lawn. The gardener wouldn't arrive for another hour, and the morning silence felt peaceful. Amelia checked her watch. 6:45 a.m. Perfect timing to intercept Liam on his walk to school. 3 blocks away, through the part of town where lawns grew wild and fences needed paint, Liam stepped out onto his front porch. He tugged at his worn shirt, the same one from yesterday, now freshly washed, but still bearing the slight stain near the collar. The morning air felt cool against his face as he started his usual route to school. "Liam, wait up." He turned, surprised to see Amelia jogging toward him, her blonde hair bouncing in its neat ponytail. She wore her usual clean-pressed uniform, but there was something different about her today, a determined set to her jaw, a spark in her eyes. "Amelia? What are you doing here?" Liam's voice carried both excitement and worry. "Won't your dad be mad?" She fell into step beside him, grinning. "Dad's still asleep. Besides, friends walk to school together, right?" A few houses down, Ethan Carter sat in his old pickup truck, about to head to the auto shop. He spotted the 2 kids walking together through his rearview mirror. Amelia's crisp uniform stood in stark contrast to Liam's worn clothes, but the way they walked shoulders close, heads bent in conversation, showed none of that mattered to them. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Part of him wanted to smile at his son's first real friendship. The other part wanted to roll down the window and tell them to separate before trouble started. Instead, he watched them pass, their laughter carrying through the morning air. "I brought you something," Amelia said as they walked. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a paper bag. "Mom's old cookie recipe. The cook made them last night." Liam's eyes widened at the treat. "Really? For me?" "For both of us. We can share them at lunch." They passed the corner store, where Travis and his friends usually hung out. Today, the bullies weren't there, and Liam felt his shoulders relax. Having Amelia beside him made the familiar walk feel different, safer somehow. "You know," Amelia said, kicking a pebble along the sidewalk, "my mom used to say that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, it just means you do the right thing anyway." Liam glanced at her. "Is that why you're walking with me? Even though your dad said not to?" "Partly," she smiled, "but mostly because you're my friend and I like talking to you." They reached the schoolyard earlier than most students. A few teachers' cars dotted the parking lot, and the morning custodian waved as he swept the front steps. Amelia and Liam found a bench near the playground, sharing the cookies while they waited for the bell. "Sometimes," Liam said quietly, breaking a cookie in half, "I wish I could just disappear when people stare at my clothes." Amelia brushed crumbs from her skirt. "Well, I wish they'd realize how stupid they are for caring about stuff like that. You're way more interesting than any piece of clothing." The playground started filling with other students. Some pointed and whispered, but Amelia sat straighter, almost daring them to say something. Liam found himself sitting taller too, drawing strength from her presence. When the morning bell rang, they headed to their separate classrooms. The hallways buzzed with the usual chatter, but today felt different. Every time someone looked ready to tease Liam, they'd catch sight of Amelia nearby and think better of it. Classes passed in their usual blur until recess. Liam found his usual spot under the big oak tree, expecting to sit alone as always. But Amelia appeared, carrying something in her hands. "Here," she said, sitting beside him. She held out a notebook dark blue with silver stars on the cover. "I got this for you yesterday." Liam took it carefully, running his fingers over the smooth cover. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "But why?" "It's for your dreams and courage," Amelia explained, her voice warm. "You can write anything in it. Songs, stories, things that make you happy or scared. Sometimes writing stuff down makes it easier to be brave." Liam opened the notebook, inhaling the fresh paper smell. The pages were crisp and clean, waiting for his words. No one had ever given him something so perfect before. "Thank you," he said, holding the notebook close to his chest like it was made of gold. "I'll use it every day." Amelia beamed, watching her friend cradle his new treasure. In that moment, under the oak tree's spreading branches, neither of them noticed the stares or whispers. They were just two friends, sharing something special, and nothing else mattered. The notebook rested in Liam's hands, its silver stars catching the sunlight. His fingers traced the cover again and again, as if making sure it was real. This wasn't just any notebook, it was proof that someone believed in him, that his thoughts and feelings mattered. He clutched it closer, this symbol of friendship and courage, while Amelia smiled beside him. The afternoon sun beat down on Carter's auto shop, making the asphalt shimmer with heat. Ethan wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grease across his weathered skin. He'd been under the hood of Mrs. Thompson's ancient Volvo for the past hour, trying to coax a few more months of life from its tired engine. The familiar chime of the shop's doorbell made him straighten up. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Amelia Sterling wheeling in a purple bicycle. The paint was chipped in places, and the chain hung loose, clearly in need of repair. "Mr. Carter," Amelia said politely, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I was hoping you could help me with my bike." Ethan grabbed a clean rag from his workbench and wiped his hands. "Miss Sterling," he said carefully, his voice measured. "Does your father know you're here?" "He doesn't need to know about every bicycle repair in town," she replied with a small smile. "The chain keeps slipping and the brakes squeak something awful. Could you take a look?" Ethan hesitated, studying the bicycle. It would be an easy fix, 30 minutes of work at most. But accepting money from the Sterling family, even for honest work, made his stomach twist. "Listen, Miss Sterling." "Amelia," she corrected gently. "Please." "Amelia," he amended. "I appreciate you bringing your business here, but—" "Mr. Carter," she interrupted, reaching into her backpack. "I know what you're going to say, and I need you to listen to me first." She pulled out her wallet and placed 3 $20 bills on the counter. "This is the standard rate for a tune-up and brake adjustment. I checked online." Ethan shook his head, pushing the money back toward her. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" Her voice was calm but firm. "Because my last name is Sterling? Because my father has money?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. He shifted uncomfortably, aware of the grease stains on his coveralls, the worn tools scattered across his workbench. "It's not that simple," he started. "Actually it is," Amelia said. She walked over to the bike and ran her hand along the handlebars. "This bike means a lot to me. My mom gave it to me before she passed away. I could take it to the fancy shop across town, but I've seen your work. Liam told me how you fixed Mrs. Peterson's car for half what the dealership wanted to charge, and it's still running perfectly." Ethan's expression softened at the mention of the old widow's car. He'd stretched that repair over 3 weekends to keep it affordable for her. "You're good at what you do, Mr. Carter," Amelia continued. "And when someone does good work, they deserve to be paid fairly. That's what my mom always said." She picked up the money and held it out again. "This isn't charity, Mr. Carter. It's respect. For your time, your skills, and your integrity. Please don't make me take my bike somewhere else just because you're worried about what people might think." The shop fell quiet except for the lazy spin of the ceiling fan. Ethan looked at the girl standing before him, not the wealthy man's daughter he'd assumed she was, but someone who understood the value of honest work. Someone who, despite her young age, saw past the surface of things. He thought about how she'd defended Liam at school, how she volunteered at the shelter without fanfare. There was nothing entitled or condescending in her manner now, just straightforward respect. Finally, Ethan nodded and accepted the money. "I'll have it ready in about an hour," he said, his voice gruff with emotion he hadn't expected to feel. "Thank you," Amelia replied simply. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You know, Mr. Carter, sometimes the hardest thing isn't giving help. It's learning to accept it with grace when it's offered fairly." As the door chimed behind her, Ethan stood for a moment, the bills still in his hand. Then he picked up his wrench and moved toward the purple bicycle, seeing it not as a symbol of charity but as what it was: honest work from a customer who valued quality over status. He worked steadily, adjusting the chain tension and replacing the brake pads. When he tested the brakes, they responded with silent precision. The chain now ran smooth and true, just as it should. It was good work, worth every dollar she'd paid, no more, no less. Through the shop window, he could see Amelia sitting on the curb, reading a book while she waited. She hadn't gone home to her air-conditioned mansion or sent a driver to pick up the bike later. She'd stayed, patient and unassuming, like any other customer. In that moment, Ethan realized he'd been just as guilty of prejudice as those who looked down on him and Liam. He'd judged Amelia by her last name, her father's wealth, the world she came from. But watching her now, her shoes scuffed, her hair falling from its neat ponytail, completely absorbed in her book, he saw her for who she truly was. A girl with her own mind, her own heart, and her own sense of right and wrong. When he wheeled the bike out to her an hour later, their transaction was simple and professional. The brakes no longer squeaked, the chain ran silent, and the payment was fair. But something had shifted between them, a mutual understanding that went beyond mere business. "Good as new," he said, demonstrating the smooth operation of the gears. Amelia's face lit up as she took the handlebars. "It's perfect, Mr. Carter. Thank you." She swung her leg over the seat and tested the brakes. Mom would be happy to know it's in good hands. As she pedaled away, her purple bike gleaming in the afternoon sun, Ethan felt the last of his preconceptions fall away. He'd been wrong about Amelia Sterling. She wasn't just some rich man's daughter playing at kindness, she was someone who understood the dignity of fair exchange, the value of skilled work, and the importance of treating people with respect. The youth shelter buzzed with its usual afternoon activity. Kids sprawled on worn couches doing homework, while volunteers moved about serving snacks and offering help. Amelia sat at a scratched wooden table in the corner, carefully sorting through boxes of donated clothing. Her fingers traced the edges of a navy blue button-down shirt that still had its original store tag attached. "These look almost new," she whispered to Mrs. Martinez, the shelter coordinator. The older woman nodded knowingly, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's the point, dear. Every child deserves to feel proud of what they wear." Amelia folded the shirt with extra care, along with several other items she'd selected. 2 pairs of jeans that looked barely worn, some t-shirts in various colors, and a lightweight jacket perfect for spring. She'd spent the past week quietly asking the shelter's regular donors for specific sizes, making sure everything would fit Liam perfectly. The shelter's side door creaked open, and Liam stepped in, his backpack hanging low on his shoulders. Amelia quickly slid the folded clothes into a plain brown paper bag, hiding it behind the donation boxes. "Hey, Liam," she called out, trying to sound casual. "How was math today?" "Better," he said, dropping his backpack beside a chair. "I finally understood those fraction problems Mrs. Wilson was talking about." Amelia beamed. "See? I told you you'd get it." She glanced at Mrs. Martinez, who gave her a subtle nod and picked up the brown paper bag. "Liam," Mrs. Martinez said, "I've been meaning to catch you. We just got some donations in your size. Would you like to look through them?" Liam's cheeks flushed slightly. He looked down at his worn shirt, tugging self-consciously at a loose thread. "I don't know." "It's what we're here for, Mrs." Martinez continued gently. "These clothes need good homes, and you'd be doing us a favor by taking some. Otherwise, they just sit in boxes taking up space." Amelia pretended to be occupied with sorting other donations, but she watched from the corner of her eye as Mrs. Martinez led Liam to a small side room. Through the doorway, she could see him carefully examining each item, his eyes growing wider with each piece he unfolded. "These are really nice," she heard him say, his voice filled with wonder. Are you sure it's okay? Absolutely, Mrs. Martinez assured him. We get donations from all over town. Some items still have tags on them. Liam held up the navy button-down shirt, running his fingers over the smooth fabric. This one's perfect for school presentations, he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. Amelia busied herself with a box of books, fighting back a smile. She'd specifically chosen that shirt, remembering Liam mentioned an upcoming social studies presentation. The original tag had read, 45 more than she knew Ethan could easily spare for a single item of clothing. A few minutes later, Liam emerged from the side room, clutching the brown paper bag to his chest like a treasure. His eyes were bright, and Amelia could see the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Thank you, Mrs. Martinez, he said earnestly. I'll take really good care of everything. I know you will, dear, Mrs. Martinez replied, giving his shoulder a gentle squeeze. That's why we're so happy to share them with you. Liam set his bag down next to his backpack and joined Amelia at the table. She noticed he seemed to sit a little straighter, as if some invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Want to work on that history homework? She asked, pulling out her textbook. Yeah, he nodded, then added in a quieter voice, The clothes are really nice. I've never had such nice things before. You deserve nice things, Liam, Amelia said simply, meeting his eyes. Everyone does. The next morning, Amelia arrived at school early, anxiously watching the hallway for Liam. When he finally walked through the main doors, her heart swelled with pride. He wore the navy button-down shirt, neatly tucked into one of the new jeans. The clothes fit him perfectly, making him look every bit as put together as any other student in the school. Other kids turned to look as he passed, but this time their expressions held surprise rather than mockery. Gone was the boy in the worn, faded hand-me-downs. In his place stood someone who walked with his head high, his backpack squared on both shoulders instead of slouched to one side. "Looking sharp, Carter," called out Jason, one of the boys who usually ignored him. Liam's face broke into a genuine smile. "Thanks," he replied, his voice clear and confident. As he approached his locker, Amelia caught his eye and gave him a small wave. He waved back, standing tall in his new clothes, finally looking as special on the outside as she knew he was on the inside. Mrs. Wilson stopped him in the hallway. "Very professional, Liam," she said warmly. "Perfect for your presentation today." "Thank you," he responded, smoothing down the front of his shirt with pride. The youth shelter had some really nice donations. A group of girls who normally whispered and giggled when Liam passed now smiled at him. One of them, Sarah, even complimented his shirt directly. Liam thanked her with an ease that Amelia had never seen before. As they settled into their first period class, Amelia noticed Liam sitting up straight in his chair, actively participating in discussions, raising his hand to answer questions. His voice was stronger, more assured. The simple gift of dignified clothing had transformed not just his appearance, but his entire demeanor. For once, Liam wasn't trying to disappear into the background. He was simply being himself, bright, kind, and worthy of respect. And his classmates were finally beginning to see it too. The morning sun streamed through the school hallway's windows as students gathered around a bright yellow poster. "Spring Fair Talent Showcase," it announced in bold letters, decorated with hand-drawn musical notes and stars. Kids clustered around, chattering excitedly about what acts they might perform. Liam hung back from the crowd, his fingers clutching the straps of his backpack. His eyes scanned the poster again and again, focusing on one particular line, "Sign-ups, open this week." His heart beat faster as he thought about his mother's favorite song, the one she used to sing while making dinner or folding laundry. He could still hear her gentle voice, clear as morning sunshine. During lunch break, when most students rushed outside to enjoy the warm spring weather, Liam quietly made his way to the music room. Miss Parker, the music teacher, looked up from her desk with a warm smile. "Can I help you, Liam?" He shifted from foot to foot, gathering his courage. I want to sign up for the talent showcase." Miss Parker's eyes lit up. "That's wonderful. What would you like to perform?" "A song," Liam said softly. "One my mom used to sing." Miss Parker's expression softened. Everyone in town knew about Liam's mother. She pulled out the sign-up sheet and handed Liam a pen. "You have a lovely voice in class, Liam. I think this is a wonderful idea." That afternoon, when Ethan picked him up from school, Liam sat quietly in the passenger seat of the old truck, the permission slip burning a hole in his backpack. The engine rumbled as they drove past Mr. Sterling's auto dealership, its shiny new cars glinting in the sunlight. "Dad?" Liam's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yeah, buddy? There's going to be a talent show at the spring fair." Liam pulled out the crumpled permission slip. I already signed up to sing." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He glanced at his son, seeing the hopeful expression in those eyes that looked so much like his mother's. His first instinct was to shield Liam from potential ridicule or disappointment. But something stopped him from saying no. "Your mom's song?" he asked quietly. Liam nodded, relief flooding his face at his father's understanding. Ethan pulled into their driveway, putting the truck in park. He turned to face his son fully. "You know it might be scary up there in front of everyone?" "I know," Liam said. "But Mom always said being brave means doing something even when you're scared." Ethan's throat tightened. He picked up the permission slip, studying it for a long moment before reaching for a pen. "She was right about that," he said, signing his name at the bottom. The next day at school, Liam practiced during lunch break in the empty music room. His voice was shaky at first, but as he closed his eyes and imagined his mother singing along, it grew stronger. He didn't hear the door open or notice Amelia standing there until she spoke. "That was beautiful," she said. Liam jumped, his face flushing red. How long were you listening?" Amelia walked into the room, setting her lunch bag on a nearby desk. "Long enough to know you're going to be amazing at the showcase." She sat down at the piano bench. "Is that the song you're performing?" Liam nodded, looking down at his feet. "It was my mom's favorite." "Will you teach it to me?" Amelia asked, her fingers hovering over the piano keys. "I could help you practice. My mom made me take piano lessons for years." For the next half hour, the music room filled with melody. Amelia, picking out the tune on the piano while Liam sang, his confidence growing with each verse. They didn't notice the lunch period ending until the bell rang. "Same time tomorrow?" Amelia asked, gathering her things. Liam's face lit up. "Really?" "Of course. We're going to make this perfect." Their lunchtime practices became a daily routine. Sometimes they worked on the song, other times they just talked and laughed. Amelia shared stories about her own mother, and Liam opened up about his memories too. The music room became their sanctuary, a place where social barriers and cruel whispers couldn't reach them. One afternoon, Ethan came to pick up Liam early for a dentist appointment. Following the sound of piano music and laughter, he found himself outside the music room. Through the small window in the door, he saw Liam and Amelia sitting at the piano, heads bent together as they worked out a particularly tricky part of the song. "No, Amelia was saying through giggles. "You have to hold that note longer. Like this." She demonstrated, her voice joining Liam's in harmony. Ethan stood frozen, watching his son's face light up with joy he hadn't seen since before his wife passed away. The way Amelia patiently encouraged Liam, celebrating every small improvement, reminded him so much of their mother's gentle teaching style. He saw now what he'd been missing. This wasn't about charity or pity. This was about friendship in its purest form. Liam's voice grew stronger, more confident as he hit the chorus. Amelia's fingers danced across the piano keys, providing the perfect accompaniment. Their shared laughter echoed through the room as they finished the verse, both breaking into spontaneous applause for each other. Ethan felt something in his heart shift, like ice melting in spring sunshine. All his worries about class differences and social expectations seemed to fade away as he watched these two kids, from such different worlds, creating something beautiful together. He found himself smiling, his hand still raised to knock on the door, content for a moment just to witness this unexpected gift of friendship. "I want to sign up to sing," Liam said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Parker's encouraging smile helped the words flow more easily. It's a song my mom used to sing." After getting signed up, Liam practically floated through the rest of his school day. The thought of performing made his stomach flutter with nervous excitement, but something deeper, something that felt right, pushed him forward. That evening, the small kitchen in the Carter home was filled with the smell of mac and cheese, Ethan's go-to dinner when work ran late. Liam pushed the pasta around his plate, gathering his courage. "Dad?" he started, his voice shakier than he'd planned. "I signed up for something today." Ethan looked up from his own plate, his work-worn hands still gripping his fork. "Oh yeah? What's that, buddy?" "The Spring Fair Talent Showcase." Liam took a deep breath. "I want to sing Mom's song, the one she always sang while making breakfast." The fork in Ethan's hand froze halfway to his mouth. His eyes, usually guarded and steady, suddenly glistened in the kitchen's fluorescent light. The moment stretched between them, heavy with memory. "Her song," Ethan finally managed, his voice rough. He set his fork down carefully, as if it might shatter. "You remember it?" Liam nodded eagerly. "Every word. She used to sing it when she braided my hair for school and when she worked in her garden, and—" his voice caught. "And the last time, in the hospital, remember?" Ethan pushed back from the table slightly, running a hand through his hair. The memory of his wife's final days hit him like a physical weight. She had sung that song even when her voice was barely more than a whisper, determined to leave their son with the gift of music. "You really want to do this?" Ethan asked, studying his son's face. "More than anything," Liam replied, his eyes shining with determination. I think she'd like it." Ethan stood up suddenly, walking to the window above the sink. He gripped the counter edge, his broad shoulders tense. Liam watched anxiously, wondering if he'd made a mistake in bringing it up. But when his father turned around, there was a smile on his face despite the tears in his eyes. "She'd love it, buddy. She'd absolutely love it." The next afternoon, Liam sat cross-legged on the floor of the youth shelter's small activity room, sheet music spread out in front of him. Amelia sat nearby, her school uniform slightly rumpled from a long day, but her eyes bright with interest. "Would you?" Liam hesitated, then pushed forward. "Would you mind listening while I practice?" Amelia's whole face lit up. "I'd be honored," she said, settling in to listen. Liam closed his eyes, remembering his mother's voice, the way she'd sway slightly as she sang. When he started singing, his voice was soft but clear, carrying the melody that had been etched into his heart years ago. The simple tune filled the room, telling a story of love that lasts beyond goodbye, of memories that become treasures, of hope that grows even in sad times. As he sang, Liam didn't notice Amelia's hand move to her heart, didn't see the tears gathering in her eyes. When the last note faded, Liam opened his eyes nervously. Was it okay?" Amelia quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Liam, that was beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your mom taught you that?" Liam nodded, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. "She sang it all the time. Dad says she had the voice of an angel." "She must have been amazing," Amelia said softly. She moved closer, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "And you're going to make her so proud at the showcase." "You really think so?" Liam asked, hope and uncertainty mixing in his voice. "I know so." Amelia's voice grew stronger, more determined. "And I'll be right there in the front row, cheering the loudest. I promise." Liam's face broke into a wide smile, the kind that made his eyes crinkle at the corners, just like his mother's used to. "Even if your dad doesn't want you to?" "Even then," Amelia said firmly. "Some things are more important than what other people want. This is your moment to honor your mom, and I wouldn't miss it for anything." They spent the next hour practicing, Amelia offering gentle suggestions about breathing and posture that she'd learned in her own music lessons. As the afternoon light softened into evening, Liam's confidence grew with each run-through of the song. When Ethan arrived to pick up his son, he found them still practicing, Liam's voice stronger than he'd ever heard it. He stood in the doorway, unnoticed, watching as his son sang the words that had once filled their home with joy. In that moment, he could almost feel his wife's presence, could almost see her proud smile reflected in their son's determined expression. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the school grounds as families began trickling in for the spring fair. Colorful banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, and the sweet scent of cotton candy mixed with the aroma of grilled hot dogs filled the air. Children laughed as they darted between game booths, their excited voices rising above the cheerful carnival music. Backstage in the school auditorium, Liam Carter stood in his new button-down shirt, his fingers fidgeting with the hem. His heart thumped so hard he could feel it in his throat. The talent show wasn't scheduled to start for another hour, but he couldn't bring himself to enjoy the fair outside. "You're going to do great," Amelia said, standing beside him. She wore a simple blue dress, having refused to dress too fancy for the occasion. "Want to practice one more time?" Liam shook his head, too nervous to speak. Through the curtain, he could hear the growing crowd in the auditorium. Parents were already claiming the best seats, their chatter echoing through the space. "Here," Amelia said, pulling a bottle of water from her backpack. "Small sips, it helps with the butterflies." Liam took the water with trembling hands. "What if I mess up? What if they laugh?" "They won't laugh," Amelia assured him, her voice firm but gentle. "And, if anyone tries, they'll have to deal with me." That got a small smile from Liam. He'd seen Amelia stand up to bullies before. She might look like a proper young lady, but she had a fierce streak when it came to protecting others. Outside the auditorium, Ethan Carter moved through the crowd, trying to keep his anxiety in check. He'd closed the auto shop early today, even turning away a potentially big repair job. Nothing was going to make him miss his son's performance. He wore his cleanest work shirt, the one without any grease stains, and had even attempted to style his usually messy hair. 10 minutes until the show starts. Ms. Parker, the music teacher, called out backstage. "Everyone get ready." Liam's face went pale. Amelia squeezed his hand. "Remember what we practiced. Just focus on the music, like when we're at your house. Pretend you're singing just for your mom." Tears pricked at Liam's eyes at the mention of his mother. The song he'd chosen, "You Are My Sunshine," had been her favorite. She used to sing it while doing dishes, while driving, while tucking him into bed. Even during her final days in the hospital, she'd hummed it softly. "She'd be so proud of you," Amelia whispered, as if reading his thoughts. The auditorium lights dimmed, and parents hurried to find their seats. Ethan slipped into a spot near the front, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He noticed Mr. Sterling, sitting in the back row, his expression stern and disapproving. But Ethan forced himself to focus on the stage instead. Ms. Parker stepped up to the microphone. "Welcome everyone to our annual Spring Fair Talent Show. We have some wonderful performances lined up today." Backstage, Liam peeked through the curtain. The auditorium was packed. It seemed like the whole town had turned out. His legs felt wobbly. "3 more acts before you," Amelia reported, checking the program. "You've got this, Liam. Remember to breathe." They watched as other students performed. A gymnastics routine, a magic trick, a piano piece. Each act earned polite applause, but Liam barely heard any of it. His whole world had narrowed to the folded paper in his pocket, where he'd written his mother's favorite lyrics. "Next up," Ms. Parker announced, "please welcome Liam Carter, who will be singing for us today." Amelia gave him one final hug. "Just like we practiced. I'll be right here." Liam walked onto the stage, his shoes feeling too big and his collar too tight. The spotlight found him, warm and bright, and for a moment he couldn't see the audience at all. Then his eyes adjusted, and he spotted his father in the front row. Ethan gave him a small nod, and somehow, that simple gesture helped steady Liam's nerves. The piano introduction began, soft and sweet. Liam closed his eyes, picturing his mother's smile, hearing her voice in his memory. When he opened his mouth to sing, his voice came out clear and true. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The simple melody filled the auditorium. Liam's young voice carried all the love and longing he felt for his mother, all the memories of her warmth and kindness. The audience fell completely silent, caught in the spell of his genuine emotion. "You make me happy when skies are gray." In the front row, Ethan felt tears rolling down his cheeks. His son's voice brought back every precious moment with his late wife, their first dance, their wedding day, the night Liam was born, and those final precious moments in the hospital. "You'll never know, dear, how much I love you." Backstage, Amelia wiped her own eyes, watching her friend pour his heart into every word. She could see people in the audience dabbing at their faces with tissues and handkerchiefs. "Please don't take my sunshine away." The final note faded into perfect silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved or breathed. Then the applause began. Not polite clapping, but real, thunderous appreciation. People stood up, their faces shining with tears and joy. Liam looked stunned by the response. Amelia couldn't contain herself any longer. She ran onto the stage and grabbed his hand, raising it high in triumph. The applause grew even louder. Ethan stood with the rest of the audience, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. His son, his brave, talented, amazing son, had just moved an entire auditorium to tears. Through his own tears, he saw Liam beaming, his face glowing with joy as Amelia held his hand high. In that moment, standing on stage with the audience cheering, Liam wasn't the poor mechanic's son anymore. He was simply himself, a boy with a beautiful voice and a heart full of love, sharing his gift with the world. The applause thundered through the auditorium as Liam finished the last note of his mother's favorite song. Tears glistened in eyes throughout the crowd, and several people rose to their feet, clapping with genuine emotion. Ethan stood near the side of the stage, his chest swelling with pride as he watched his son take a small, humble bow. Amelia beamed from her spot in the front row, her hands clapping enthusiastically. For a moment, everything felt perfect, like the walls between their different worlds had finally crumbled. Then came the sharp sound of expensive shoes clicking against the wooden floor. Charles Sterling's tall figure cut through the crowd like a knife. His tailored suit seemed out of place among the casual fair attendees, and his face was set in hard lines of anger. People quickly stepped aside, creating a path as he strode purposefully toward the stage. "This ends now," Mr. Sterling's voice boomed across the auditorium, silencing the lingering applause. He pointed an accusatory finger at Ethan. "I've watched this manipulation go on long enough." The happy atmosphere evaporated instantly. Parents who had been wiping away touched tears now drew back, pulling their children closer. Liam stood frozen on stage, his earlier confidence crumbling under Mr. Sterling's fierce glare. "Dad, stop!" Amelia jumped up from her seat, but Mr. Sterling held up his hand to silence her. "You've been using your son to play on my daughter's sympathies." Mr. Sterling continued, his words cutting through the stunned silence. "Getting her to arrange for clothing donations, accepting her help, it's all been a calculated move to gain status in this community." Ethan's face reddened, but he kept his voice steady. "That's not true, Mr. Sterling. Your daughter has shown kindness to my son out of her own heart." "Kindness?" Mr. Sterling laughed coldly. "The Sterlings have built this town through hard work and business sense, not by falling for sob stories from." He looked Ethan up and down with disdain. "A charity case in coveralls." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Liam's lower lip trembled as he looked desperately at his father. The new shirt he'd been so proud to wear now felt like it was burning against his skin. Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. But his years of quiet dignity wouldn't let him lash out. He could take the insults himself, but seeing his son's moment of triumph twisted into public humiliation made his heart ache. "I fix cars for a living, Mr. Sterling," Ethan said quietly. "It's honest work, and I've never asked for anything more than fair payment for my services. Yet here you are," Mr. Sterling gestured broadly at the stage, "parading your son around, using him to curry favor with my daughter. Did you think I wouldn't see through it? That somehow you could social climb your way into our circle?" Parents who had praised Liam's performance moments ago now whispered behind their hands. Children who had been moved by his song now stared at their feet, afraid to meet his eyes. The microphone was still on, amplifying Liam's shaky breathing as tears began rolling down his cheeks. The sheet music in his hands trembled visibly. "Daddy, please." Amelia's voice cracked with emotion. "You're being cruel." But Mr. Sterling wasn't finished. "I built my fortune from nothing, and I won't have my daughter's reputation tarnished by association with." He waved his hand dismissively at Ethan, someone who can't even provide proper clothes for his own child. The words hung in the air like poison. Liam's shoulders slumped as if physically struck, and several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ethan took a step forward, his face pale but composed. "Mr. Sterling, whatever you think of me, please don't do this to my son. He's just a boy who wanted to sing. A boy who should know his place," Mr. Sterling snapped. "Just like his father should." Liam dropped his sheet music, the papers scattering across the stage like fallen leaves. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the speakers as he ran off stage, disappearing behind the curtain. The silence that followed was deafening. Where moments ago there had been joy and celebration, now there was only the heavy weight of shame and class division laid bare for all to see. Ethan stood alone in his work clothes, marked by Mr. Sterling's words as something less than those around him. The bright stage lights that had showcased his son's talent now felt like a spotlight of humiliation. Parents began gathering their children, eager to escape the uncomfortable scene. The spring fair's festive atmosphere had been irreparably damaged, leaving behind only the bitter taste of prejudice and broken dreams. Amelia remained rooted to her spot, tears streaming down her face as she looked between her father and the direction Liam had fled. Her small hands were balled into fists, her whole body trembling with a mix of anger and helplessness. Mr. Sterling straightened his already immaculate tie, a gesture of finality. "I trust this matter is now settled," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. He turned to leave, expecting Amelia to follow, but she didn't move. Ethan stood there, his weathered hands, stained with honest work, hanging limply at his sides. The man who had faced every hardship with quiet dignity now bore the weight of public shame, not for anything he had done wrong, but simply for being who he was, a hard-working father doing his best for his son. The sound of carnival music from outside drifted in through the open doors, a jarring contrast to the heavy silence within. The simple joy of Liam's performance, the pride in his voice as he sang his mother's song, had been crushed under the expensive heel of wealth and privilege. The spring fair's cheerful lights cast long shadows across the empty school grounds. Most families had hurried home after Mr. Statered by dat guy. Sterling's outburst, leaving behind scattered paper cups and half-dismantled booths. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the sound of folding chairs scraping against concrete as Ethan mechanically stacked them one by one. His hands moved automatically, while his mind replayed Mr. Sterling's words over and over. A charity case in coveralls. The phrase burned in his chest, familiar as an old wound reopened. He'd heard similar words before, seen those same looks of pity mixed with disdain, but never so publicly, never in front of Liam. "Mr. Carter?" Amelia's voice came soft and hesitant from behind him. "Please, let me help." Ethan didn't turn around. He couldn't bear to see the guilt in her eyes, knowing it would only make this harder. "You should go home, Amelia. Your father's waiting." "But what happened? What he said, it wasn't right." Her voice cracked slightly. "You and Liam don't deserve any of this." Finally, Ethan set down the chair he was holding and faced her. Amelia stood in her pretty blue dress from the talent show, looking small and lost under the harsh outdoor lights. For a moment, he saw what Liam must have seen that first day. Not a wealthy man's daughter, but just a kind-hearted girl trying to do what was right. "Listen," he said, keeping his voice gentle but firm. "You've been good to Liam, better than anyone else at this school. But your father was right about one thing we do, live in different worlds." "That doesn't matter to me," Amelia protested, taking a step forward. "Liam is my friend. You can't just—" "It matters to everyone else," Ethan cut in, his hands clenching at his sides. "And it should matter to you too. This isn't some fairy tale where friendship conquers all. There are real consequences in this town when you cross those lines." Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes. But the shelter was different. That was helping from a distance. This. He gestured at the remnants of the fair, where just hours ago everything had seemed possible. "This is too close, too personal. Your father won't allow it, and I won't let Liam get hurt worse in the end." "Dad!" Liam's quiet voice drifted over from where he sat on a nearby bench, hugging his knees to his chest. He'd been silent since Mr. Sterling's outburst, his earlier triumph crushed beneath the weight of public humiliation. "Time to go, buddy," Ethan called, trying to keep his voice steady. "Help me load these last chairs in the truck." Amelia watched helplessly as Liam shuffled over, his shoulders slumped. "Liam, I'm so sorry. Please, don't. It's okay, Liam mumbled, not meeting her eyes. You don't have to pretend anymore. I know how things work. The defeat in his son's voice cut through Ethan like a knife. This was exactly what he'd feared from the beginning. The inevitable moment when Liam learned that some doors would always be closed to people like them. We should go, Ethan said quietly, placing a hand on Liam's shoulder. He looked at Amelia one last time, seeing the tears now falling freely down her cheeks. Thank you for everything you tried to do, but it's best if you stay away from now on. Amelia opened her mouth to argue again, but the sound of expensive tires on gravel cut her off. A black luxury car pulled into the parking lot, its headlights sweeping across them like a spotlight. That's your ride, Ethan said, turning away. Goodbye, Amelia. He guided Liam toward their old pickup truck, trying not to hear Amelia's choked sob behind them. The truck's door creaked as they climbed in, the sound achingly ordinary against the weight of what they were leaving behind. As Ethan started the engine, he caught a glimpse of Mr. Sterling in his rearview mirror, striding across the parking lot toward his daughter. The man's expensive suit and commanding presence seemed to fill the entire space, a reminder of everything Ethan couldn't provide. They pulled out of the school grounds in silence. The darkness pressed against the windows as they drove through familiar streets that somehow felt different now. Every so often, a small sniff came from the back seat where Liam sat, each one hitting Ethan like a physical blow. At a red light, Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror. Liam had pressed himself against the window, his reflection showing silent tears tracking down his face. The sight made Ethan's hands tighten on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. This was supposed to have been Liam's moment of triumph, his chance to shine, to honor his mother's memory, to show everyone who he really was. Instead, it had become another lesson in knowing his place, the very lesson Ethan had worked so hard to protect him from. The truck rumbled through the quiet streets, passing darkened shops and empty sidewalks. Each turn brought them closer to home, but further from the brief, shining moment when it had seemed like things could be different. When a wealthy girl's kindness and a poor boy's courage had nearly bridged an impossible gap. But reality had reasserted itself with brutal efficiency. The walls between their worlds stood as solid as ever, reinforced by generations of unspoken rules and carefully maintained distances. And no amount of wishing could change that fundamental truth. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Carter's Auto Repair, casting weak shadows across the concrete floor. The familiar smell of oil and metal hung in the air, but today it felt different, heavier somehow, like the atmosphere itself was weighing down on their shoulders. Ethan moved methodically around a beaten-up Chevy, his tools clanking against metal with more force than necessary. His jaw remained set, teeth clenched as he worked. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed a sleepless night, but he hadn't said a word about it. He hadn't said much of anything since they'd left the fair. In the corner of the shop, Liam sat on his usual stool, the one Ethan had placed there years ago so his son could do homework while he worked. The notebook Amelia had given him lay open in his lap, its pages still mostly blank. His fingers traced the edge of the paper, remembering how proud he'd felt just yesterday when he'd stepped onto that stage. The radio that usually played country music sat silent. Neither father nor son had reached to turn it on. The only sounds were the metallic clinks of Ethan's wrench and the occasional squeak of Liam's stool when he shifted position. A car drove past the shop, and Liam's head snapped up hopefully, but it wasn't the familiar black sedan he'd been watching for. His shoulders slumped again as he returned to staring at the empty page before him. "Dad?" Liam's voice cracked slightly, breaking the heavy silence. Ethan paused, wrench mid-turn. "Yeah, buddy? Do you think?" Liam hesitated, picking at the corner of his notebook. "Do you think Amelia's okay?" The wrench resumed its work, perhaps a bit more forcefully than before. "I'm sure she's fine, Liam. The Sterlings always are. But she looked so sad when—" Liam. Ethan's tone carried a warning, though his face softened when he saw his son flinch. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked over, crouching beside the stool. "Look, sometimes people come from different worlds. And no matter how much we might wish things were different, those worlds don't mix well." Liam's fingers tightened around his pencil. "But she's not like that. She's not like her dad at all. I know she's been kind to you," Ethan said carefully, placing a hand on Liam's shoulder. "But her father, he has a point. People like us, we work hard, and we take care of our own. We don't need—" "Don't say charity," Liam interrupted, his voice small but firm. "That's not what it was. Amelia never treated us like we were beneath her. She treated us like friends." Ethan stood up, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Friends? Don't get you publicly humiliated in front of the whole town, son." "That wasn't her fault," Liam protested, clutching the notebook to his chest. "She tried to stop him. You saw her face when her dad started yelling." The memory of yesterday's chaos flashed through Ethan's mind. Mr. Ration, Sterling's thundering voice, the shocked faces of the crowd, Amelia's desperate attempts to interrupt her father, and worst of all, the look of shame that had crossed Liam's face when the word charity had been spat at them like an accusation. "Just focus on your homework," Ethan said finally, turning back to the Chevy. "We've got bills to pay, and I need to get this car finished by noon." Liam looked down at his notebook, at the blank pages that seemed to mock him. Yesterday, these pages had held such promise. Amelia had told him to fill them with his dreams, with the songs he wanted to sing, with the person he wanted to become. Now each empty line reminded him of the silence in the shop, of the happiness that had been snatched away so quickly. The morning dragged on. Customers came and went, speaking in hushed tones, as if they could sense the heavy atmosphere. A few cast sympathetic glances at Liam, which only made him sink further into his corner. He'd rather have their mockery than their pity. Around 11, Mrs. Johnson picked up her car, and Ethan disappeared into the office to handle the paperwork. Left alone, Liam finally picked up his pencil. He stared at the blank page for a long moment, remembering how it felt to stand on that stage, how the music had filled him with courage, how Amelia had beamed at him from the front row. His pencil touched the paper, and slowly, carefully, he began to write. The words came from somewhere deep inside, somewhere that still held on to the warmth of yesterday's triumph before it had all fallen apart. Somewhere that remembered the look in Amelia's eyes when she'd told him his voice was a gift, that he shouldn't hide it away just because some people might not understand. When Ethan returned from the office, he found Liam still bent over the notebook, writing with an intensity that made him pause. His son's face had lost that morning's defeated look, replaced by something else, determination maybe, or resolve. Liam wrote the final words with careful precision. "Amelia believed in me. I won't give up." He stared at the sentence for a long moment, then slowly closed the notebook, holding it close like a shield against the world that seemed determined to remind him of his place in it. The kitchen was quiet, except for the soft clink of forks against plates and the hum of their old refrigerator. Ethan and Liam sat across from each other at their small wooden table, picking at the simple dinner of mac and cheese. The events of the spring fair hung between them like a heavy curtain, making even their usual comfortable silence feel strained. Ethan watched his son push the pasta around his plate. Liam hadn't touched his favorite meal, and that worried him more than anything. The boy's shoulders were slumped, but there was something in his expression, a familiar determination that reminded Ethan so much of his late wife. "Dad," Liam said suddenly, putting down his fork. His voice was quiet but steady. "We need to talk about Amelia." Ethan's hand tightened around his own fork. "Liam, we've been through this. It's better if we—" "No, Dad, please listen." Liam's blue eyes met his father's, and Ethan was struck by the maturity he saw there. "Remember when those kids were making fun of my old shirt? Everyone just watched. Teachers, other parents, they all just looked away." Ethan's chest tightened at the memory. He nodded slowly, unable to find words. "But Amelia didn't look away," Liam continued, his voice growing stronger. "She stood up for me in front of everyone. She didn't care what people thought. She didn't care that her fancy friends might stop talking to her." "That's different, son," Ethan tried to explain, but his voice felt weak even to his own ears. "Mr. Sterling is just another bully," Liam cut in, his cheeks flushing with emotion. "And you always told me we don't let bullies win. You said we have to stand up for what's right." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. How many times had he repeated that lesson to Liam? How many times had he promised his son that courage meant doing the right thing, even when it was hard? "She's all alone now, Dad," Liam said, his voice catching. "Her dad's making her eat lunch by herself. I saw her today, sitting at the empty table near the cafeteria door. The same kids who used to beg to be her friends won't even look at her." He pulled out the notebook Amelia had given him, running his fingers over its cover. "And it's because of us. Because she chose to be kind to us." Ethan pushed his plate away, his appetite gone. "Liam, sometimes life isn't fair. Sometimes we have to accept—" "No," Liam's voice rose, surprising them both. "That's what you always say about the bullies at school. That's what you said about Mr. Peterson when he wouldn't pay you for fixing his truck. That's what you say about everything unfair." Tears welled in his eyes. "But Amelia didn't accept it when she saw me being treated unfairly. She did something about it." The truth of his son's words struck deep. Ethan remembered watching Amelia that day in the assembly, how she'd stood tall against the cruel laughter. He thought about her showing up at his shop with cookies, her insistence on paying for repairs, the way she'd arranged clothes for Liam through the shelter to protect his pride. "When Mom died," Liam continued, his voice softening, "you told me we had to be brave for her. That she'd want us to keep going, to be good people, no matter what." He clutched the notebook tighter. "Amelia is good people, Dad, and she needs us to be brave for her now." Ethan stood up abruptly, walking to the kitchen window. Outside, the street was dark except for the flickering streetlight on the corner. He thought about all the times he'd chosen to stay quiet, to keep his head down, to accept the unfairness of life because fighting back seemed impossible. He'd told himself it was about survival, about protecting Liam. But watching his son now, seeing the fierce light of justice in his eyes, Ethan realized something important. He hadn't been protecting Liam at all. He'd been teaching him to be afraid. "You're right," Ethan said finally, turning back to face his son. His voice was rough with emotion. "Your mother would be ashamed of me, right now." Liam shook his head, standing up to join his father. "No, she'd understand being scared, but she'd want us to do the right thing anyway." Ethan looked down at his son, this remarkable boy who somehow had more courage than he did. In Liam's face, he saw echoes of his wife's strength, her unwavering sense of right and wrong. And he saw something else, too, the impact of Amelia's friendship, how it had helped Liam find his voice. The fear was still there, whispering about consequences and practicality. But for the first time in years, Ethan felt something stronger, growing in his chest, determination. He thought about Amelia, standing alone in that cafeteria, paying the price for her kindness. He thought about all the times he'd fixed cars with careful honesty, while others cut corners for profit. He thought about his wife, who had faced death itself with dignity and grace. "We can't let fear control our lives anymore," Ethan said quietly, placing a hand on Liam's shoulder. "Your mother would want us to stand up, and Amelia, she deserves better than our silence." The town hall's mahogany-paneled meeting room buzzed with conversation as Millbrook's wealthiest residents filed in, dressed in expensive suits and designer dresses. The monthly council meeting about school funding had never drawn such a crowd before. Even the ancient leather chairs, usually half empty, were filled to capacity. Mr. Sterling sat in the front row, his crisp navy suit making him look more like a CEO than a concerned parent. Around him, other influential parents whispered and nodded, occasionally glancing at their phones or checking their watches. The air felt thick with privilege and unspoken agreements. Principal Matthews stood at the podium, shuffling through his papers with nervous hands. "We'll begin the discussion about the proposed budget allocations for—" The heavy wooden doors at the back of the room creaked open. Amelia Sterling stood in the doorway, her normally perfect posture slightly hunched, but her chin held high. She wore her school uniform, a simple plaid skirt and white blouse, rather than the expensive clothes her father usually insisted on for public appearances. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides, but her eyes were clear and determined. A wave of whispers swept through the room. Mr. Sterling's face darkened as he half rose from his chair, but before he could speak, Amelia walked purposefully down the center aisle. "Principal Matthews," she said, her voice quavering but growing stronger with each word. "I'd like to speak, please, about the funding." The principal glanced uncertainly at Mr. Sterling, who had now fully stood up. "Amelia," Mr. Sterling said, his tone carrying a clear warning, "this is not the place for—" "It's exactly the place," Amelia interrupted, something she'd never done before. The room fell silent. Even the usual rustling of papers stilled. "This meeting is about our school's future, and I'm a student. Don't I get a voice?" Principal Matthews cleared his throat. "Well, technically, any community member can speak for 3 minutes during the open forum portion." "Thank you," Amelia said quickly, climbing the steps to the podium before anyone could stop her. Her legs felt like jelly, but she gripped the wooden stand firmly, remembering how Liam had stood on stage at the spring fair, facing his fears with nothing but a song and his truth. She took a deep breath and looked out at the sea of familiar faces, parents of classmates she'd known since kindergarten, people who'd attended her birthday parties, who'd praised her manners and called her such a good girl for years. Now they stared at her with mixture of curiosity and discomfort. "I've been thinking a lot about what makes a school great," she began, her voice small at first but gathering strength. "Is it the fancy new computers? The fresh paint in the hallways? The expensive sports equipment?" She paused, meeting the eyes of Mrs. Peterson, who'd complained last month about the declining standards when Liam had been allowed to join the advanced reading group. "Those things are nice," Amelia continued, "but they're not what makes a school great. What makes a school great is how it treats every single student, not just the ones with new backpacks or brand-name shoes. Every single one." Mr. Sterling shifted in his seat, his jaw clenched. But Amelia pressed on, her voice growing steadier. "I used to think I was lucky because my family has money. But then I met someone who taught me what real wealth looks like. His name is Liam Carter, and some of you know him as the mechanic's kid." She emphasized the last words, making several parents look down at their laps. "He comes to school in hand, me down sometimes. He brings simple lunches in paper bags, and he has more dignity, more kindness, and more courage than I've seen in this whole room." The silence in the room grew heavier. Amelia's hands had stopped shaking now. When kids were bullying others, Liam wrote them encouraging notes in secret. When Tommy Phillips was struggling with math, Liam stayed after school to help him. The same Tommy who had made fun of his old shoes a week before. When the shelter needed volunteers, Liam was there, even though he barely has enough himself. She turned slightly to face her father directly now. "You all talk about standards and appearances and what's proper, but while you were planning which country club to join or which car to buy next, Liam was teaching me what real character looks like. His dad works harder than anyone I know, fixing our cars, keeping them safe, never complaining, and yet some of you treat him like he's beneath you." Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice remained strong. "My mom used to say that true wealth isn't in our wallets, it's in our hearts. She said we show who we really are by how we treat those who can't do anything for us in return. If she were here today," Amelia's voice caught for a moment, "if she were here, she'd be ashamed of how we've acted. I know I am." Several parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mrs. Peterson dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "So yes, let's talk about school funding," Amelia continued. "But let's talk about using it to help every student feel valued. Let's talk about making sure no child feels less worthy because their parents work with their hands instead of sitting in offices. Let's talk about teaching real values instead of just writing checks." She straightened her shoulders, looking around the room one last time. "Because if we can't do that, if we can't show basic compassion and respect to every single person in our community, then all the money in the world won't make our school truly great. It'll just make it expensive." The room remained perfectly still as Amelia's words hung in the air. She could feel her heart pounding, but she stood tall, channeling every ounce of courage Liam had shown her over the past months. In that moment, she wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for every kid who'd ever felt less than, every parent who'd worked their fingers to the bone for their children, and every person who'd been judged by their bank account instead of their character. The oak double doors of the town hall creaked as another group of well-dressed parents entered, their heels clicking against the polished floor. Ethan Carter sat in the back row, his work clothes standing out among the sea of expensive suits. His calloused hands fidgeted with his worn baseball cap as he listened to Amelia's clear voice ring through the chamber. "True wealth isn't about money," Amelia declared, her small frame standing tall at the podium. "It's about how we treat each other, about the kindness we show when no one's watching." Ethan's chest tightened. He thought about Liam at home, probably working on his homework at their scratched kitchen table. His son's words echoed in his mind. "Amelia stood up for us when no one else would." Before he knew what he was doing, Ethan found himself rising from his seat. Whispers rippled through the crowd as he made his way down the center aisle, his work boots heavy against the carpet. Some people wrinkled their noses at the lingering smell of motor oil that clung to his clothes. "I'd like to say something," Ethan said, his voice rougher than he intended. The council members exchanged glances, but the chairwoman nodded. Amelia stepped aside, giving him an encouraging smile. Up close, he could see tears glistening in her eyes. Ethan gripped the edges of the podium, his knuckles white. He'd never spoken in public before, but the words came straight from his heart. "My name is Ethan Carter. Most of you know me as the mechanic down on Pine Street." He paused, swallowing hard. "Some of you probably know me as that poor single dad, or the charity case in coveralls." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mr. Sterling, sitting in the front row, stared at him with cold eyes. "What you might not know is that every morning I get up at 5 to make sure my son has breakfast before school. That I work 12-hour days to keep a roof over our heads. That sometimes I skip meals so Liam can have enough to eat." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "You might not know that when my wife died, I had to learn how to braid Liam's shoelaces the way she used to, because it was the only thing that would make him smile. Or that I spend every Sunday teaching him how to change oil and fix engines, not just because I want him to learn the trade, but because those moments together are precious." Ethan looked directly at Mr. Sterling now. "I'm not ashamed of being poor. I'm proud of every honest dollar I've earned. What shames me is watching my 10-year-old son try to hide his tears because kids at school mock his clothes. What hurts is seeing him learn that in this town, your worth is measured by the size of your house or the car you drive." The room had grown very quiet. Even the usual shuffling of papers had stopped. "But then your daughter, Mr. Sterling, showed my boy something different. She showed him that kindness doesn't care about bank accounts. That friendship isn't about what you wear or where you live." Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "Amelia didn't just stand up to bullies, she taught Liam, and me, that courage isn't about having everything. It's about sharing what you have, even when others tell you not to." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of parents he'd fixed cars for, teachers who'd sent worried notes home about Liam's worn-out school supplies. "I'm not asking for handouts. I'm not asking for pity. All I'm asking is for you to see that when you judge kids like Liam, when you teach your children that some friendships are beneath them, you're not protecting them. You're teaching them that money matters more than character." Ethan straightened his shoulders. "My son may not have expensive clothes or the newest toys, but he has something more valuable. He has integrity. He has compassion, and thanks to Amelia Sterling, he now knows that those things are worth fighting for." The silence in the room was absolute. Ethan could hear his own heart pounding. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the room, a single person began to clap. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, the cafeteria worker who sometimes slipped Liam extra milk at lunch. Another person joined in, Mr. Thompson, whose ancient pickup truck Ethan had kept running for years with creative repairs and payment plans. Then Miss Pausen, Parker, Liam's teacher, stood up, applauding with tears in her eyes. Like a wave, it spread through the room. Regular folks, the shopkeepers, the janitors, the teaching assistants, all rose to their feet. Their applause filled the chamber, drowning out the uncomfortable shifting of the wealthy parents still seated. Amelia beamed at Ethan, her face shining with pride. For the first time since the spring fair disaster, Ethan felt something heavy lift from his shoulders. He wasn't just a struggling mechanic anymore. He was a father standing up for his son, for what was right. And he wasn't standing alone. Charles Sterling shifted uncomfortably in his front row seat, his perfectly tailored suit suddenly feeling too tight around his collar. As he watched the mechanic speak with raw honesty, an old familiar ache stirred in his chest. Something in Ethan Carter's words cut through his carefully constructed walls of propriety and position. "Amelia didn't just stand up to bullies," Ethan continued, his voice carrying throughout the hushed chamber. "She taught Liam that he matters, that his dreams are worth fighting for." Charles's hand unconsciously moved to his chest pocket where he always kept the small photo of Margaret, his late wife. He could almost hear her gentle voice chiding him. "Money isn't everything, Charles. It's what you do with your heart that counts." The memory of Margaret volunteering at that same youth shelter where Amelia now spent her time flooded back, how she'd come home with stories of the families she'd helped, her eyes shining with purpose. She never cared about status or appearance, only about making a difference in people's lives. "Your daughter has her mother's heart," someone had told him recently. He'd dismissed it then, seeing it as a weakness rather than the strength it truly was. Charles glanced at Amelia standing near the podium, her chin held high, despite her trembling hands. The spitting image of Margaret at that age, not just in looks, but in spirit. His daughter's unwavering support of the Carter boy wasn't rebellion or naivety as he'd assumed. It was courage, pure, simple courage. The mechanic's words continued to fill the chamber. "I've spent years teaching my son to be honest, hard-working, and kind. But lately, this town has been teaching him a different lesson, that none of that matters if you don't have the right address or bank account." Charles felt the weight of every eye in the room. Many were nodding now, including some of his own social circle. The truth in Ethan's words was undeniable. Margaret would be ashamed of me, Charles thought, his throat tightening. His wife had always said their wealth was a responsibility, not a privilege. A means to lift others up, not push them down. He watched as Ethan gestured toward Amelia. "This young lady didn't see my son's worn clothes or our small house. She saw his heart. She heard his music. She recognized his worth." The mechanic's voice grew thick with emotion. "And that's something no amount of money can buy." Charles's vision blurred slightly as he remembered Margaret's last words to him. "Promise me, you'll help Amelia keep her gentle heart, Charles. Don't let our wealth harden her like it's hardened you." He'd failed that promise. In his determination to protect Amelia, to maintain their social standing, he'd tried to stamp out the very qualities that made her special, the same qualities that had made him fall in love with Margaret all those years ago. Ethan's speech continued, but Charles was lost in thought, remembering countless charity events where Margaret had insisted on serving food herself, instead of just writing checks. How she'd taught Amelia to look people in the eye regardless of their station in life. The way she'd light up when helping others, just as Amelia did now. The room erupted in applause as Ethan finished speaking. Charles noticed several council members wiping their eyes. Even his closest business associates seemed moved. The chairman called for a brief recess, and people began to mill about, discussing what they'd heard in hushed, respectful tones. Charles remained seated, watching Amelia approach Ethan with a grateful smile. The mechanic's words about teaching his son values despite their circumstances echoed in his mind. Wasn't that exactly what Margaret would have wanted for Amelia? To value character over currency? As the crowd thinned, Charles finally stood, straightening his tie more out of habit than necessity. He caught Amelia's eye across the room. His daughter, his brave, compassionate daughter, stood her ground, clearly expecting another confrontation. Instead, Charles felt the hard shell around his heart crack. Margaret had always said everyone deserved a chance to be heard. He'd forgotten that lesson, but Amelia hadn't. She'd been living it all along. Making his way through the dispersing crowd, Charles approached his daughter. Amelia tensed slightly but held her head high, just like her mother used to do when standing up for what she believed in. "Amelia," he said softly, his voice rougher than usual. She met his gaze steadily, and in that moment he saw Margaret's strength shining through her eyes. Taking a deep breath, Charles spoke the words that had been building in his heart throughout Ethan's speech. "Maybe you were right." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the open garage door of Carter's auto repair. Ethan wiped his greasy hands on a worn red rag, studying the timing belt he'd just replaced. The familiar sense of motor oil and rubber filled the air as he worked, finding comfort in the routine that had sustained him and Liam for so long. The crunch of expensive shoes on concrete made him look up. His breath caught when he saw Charles Sterling standing there, looking decidedly out of place in his $1,000 suit among the tool chests and lifts. Ethan straightened, his guard instantly up. "Mr. Sterling," he said stiffly, uncertain whether to expect another confrontation. But something was different about the wealthy man's bearing today. The usual arrogance had softened around the edges. Charles cleared his throat, shifting his weight from one polished shoe to the other. "Mr. Carter," Charles began, then paused. He glanced around the shop, taking in the meticulously organized tools and the current project car up on the lift. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work. Just finished up, actually." Ethan tossed the rag onto his workbench, watching the other man carefully. Charles took a step forward, extending his hand. "I believe we got off on the wrong foot." Ethan stared at the offered hand for a long moment. The memory of public humiliation at the fair was still fresh, but there was something genuine in Charles's expression that gave him pause. "I heard about what happened at the council meeting," Charles continued when Ethan didn't immediately respond. "About Liam's singing. Amelia tells me he has quite a gift." At the mention of his son, Ethan's expression softened slightly. "He does. Gets it from his mother. Margaret, my late wife, she was a singer too," Charles said quietly. "Used to perform at charity events. That song Liam chose for the fair. It was one of her favorites as well." The revelation hung in the air between them. Ethan could see the grief flash across Charles's face, the same pain he recognized from his own mirror. "Look," Charles said, his hand still extended, I've been exactly what Amelia accused me of being. Prideful, short-sighted." He swallowed hard. "Margaret would have been ashamed of how I acted." Ethan studied the man before him. Gone was the commanding presence that had terrorized the fair. In its place stood someone more human, a father trying to make things right. "Your daughter," Ethan said carefully. "She's got a good heart. Liam, he lights up whenever she's around. She made him believe in himself again." Charles nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "She's like her mother that way, sees the best in people." He glanced down at his still extended hand. "I'd like to start over, if you're willing. Maybe we could arrange for Liam to perform at the community center sometime? They have a beautiful piano there." The tension in Ethan's shoulders began to ease. He thought of Liam's face when he sang, how alive his boy looked on that stage before everything fell apart. From the back of the shop came the sound of footsteps, and both men turned to see Liam himself appearing from the small office where he usually did his homework. "Dad?" Liam called out, then stopped short when he saw their visitor. Instead of shrinking away as he once might have, he stood tall, meeting Charles's gaze. Charles's expression softened further. "Hello, Liam. I was just telling your father what a wonderful performer you are." A tentative smile crossed Liam's face. He looked to his father, waiting. Ethan felt the last of his resistance crumble. He reached out and took Charles's hand, giving it a firm shake. "Maybe we can work something out," he said. The smile that broke across Liam's face was like sunshine after rain. He bounced on his toes, looking between the two men with growing excitement. "Really?" Liam asked, hope making his voice bright. Charles nodded, releasing Ethan's hand. "Really? And perhaps?" He hesitated, then continued. "Perhaps you'd both join us for dinner this weekend? Amelia would be delighted." Ethan glanced at his son's eager face, then back to Charles. The wealthy man's eyes held none of their former contempt, only a cautious warmth and what might have been regret. "We'd like that," Ethan said finally. Though wariness still lingered in the back of his mind, he couldn't deny the possibility of a new beginning. Liam's beam grew even brighter, lighting up the whole shop with its radiance. He looked as though all his birthday wishes had come true at once. The morning air was crisp as Ethan and Liam stood in the auto shop's parking lot, admiring their handiwork. Before them sat a restored 2010 Honda Civic, not fancy or new, but solid and dependable. Its fresh blue paint, gleamed in the sunlight, the result of 3 weeks of evening work after regular shop hours. "Do you think she'll like it, Dad?" Liam bounced on his toes, unable to contain his excitement. He ran his hand along the newly buffed hood, careful not to leave fingerprints on the spotless surface. "I hope so, buddy." Ethan smiled, remembering how he discovered Amelia had been walking 4 miles each way to volunteer at the shelter. The car had come from Mr. Johnson, an elderly client who'd offered it when he heard about Amelia's dedication. With some mechanical work and a lot of elbow grease, they'd transformed it from a tired commuter into something special. "We should add the bow now," Liam said, pulling a large red ribbon from behind his back. "Like they do in commercials." Ethan chuckled and helped Liam secure the bow to the hood. They'd cleaned every inch of the interior, replaced the worn seats with better ones from the salvage yard, and even installed a small CD player. Liam had insisted on leaving a mix CD of his favorite songs in it, including the one he'd performed at the spring fair. "Remember what we practiced?" Ethan asked, checking his watch. Amelia would arrive any minute, thinking she was just stopping by to say hello on her way to the shelter. "Yep." Liam straightened his collar, trying to look professional. "I say, 'Thank you for being the best friend ever,' and then you give her the keys." The sound of footsteps made them both turn. Amelia appeared around the corner, her familiar messenger bag slung over her shoulder. She wore simple jeans and a t-shirt, her volunteer outfit, but carried herself with the same quiet confidence that had first drawn Liam to her friendship. "Hi, guys," she called out, then stopped short when she saw the car. Her eyes widened. "What's this?" Liam couldn't wait another second. He rushed forward, grabbing her hand. "Come see! Come see!" Ethan watched as his son pulled Amelia toward the car, her confused smile growing wider with each step. The morning sun caught her expression of surprise, and he felt a warmth in his chest, seeing how far they'd all come since those first difficult days. "We fixed it up for you," Liam announced proudly. "Dad did all the hard stuff, but I helped clean and pick the color and everything." Amelia's hand went to her mouth. "For me? But why?" "Because you walk so far to help people," Liam explained, suddenly serious. "And because you're the best friend ever. That's what I was supposed to say, right, Dad?" Ethan stepped forward, holding out the keys. "We noticed you walking miles every day to volunteer. Mr. Johnson donated his old car, and well." He shrugged, trying to keep his voice steady. "It needed some work, but it's safe and reliable now. The tank's full, and it's got new tires, new brakes, and a CD player," Liam interrupted. "I made you a mix." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes as she took the keys with trembling fingers. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll accept it," Ethan said softly. "It's not charity, it's a thank you. For everything you've done for Liam, for standing up when others wouldn't, for showing us all what real friendship looks like." Amelia ran her hand along the car's smooth surface, taking in every detail. "It's beautiful," she managed. "The color is perfect." "That was my idea," Liam beamed. "Blue like the sky, because you helped make everything brighter." She laughed through her tears at that, and Ethan felt his own eyes growing misty. This girl had changed their lives in ways he never could have imagined that first day at school. "Want to see inside?" Liam asked, already opening the driver's door. "The seats are super clean, and look, there's even a little flower air freshener." Amelia slid into the driver's seat, her hands resting on the steering wheel, as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. Liam hopped into the passenger seat beside her, pointing out all the features they'd added or fixed. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, watching his son's animated explanations and Amelia's delighted reactions. The sight stirred something in his heart: pride, gratitude, and a deep sense of rightness. "Oh," Amelia suddenly exclaimed, noticing the CD player. "Is this the mix you mentioned?" "Press play," Liam urged, reaching for the button. The opening notes of his spring fair song filled the car, and Amelia's eyes welled up again. Without warning, she pulled Liam into a tight hug, then reached out and grabbed Ethan's hand where it rested on the door. "Thank you both so much," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She squeezed Liam closer, whispering into his ear, "You'll never stand alone again." The evening sun cast long shadows across Ethan's auto shop parking lot, now transformed into an impromptu community gathering space. Folding tables lined the asphalt, laden with potluck dishes that ranged from homemade casseroles to professionally catered hors d'oeuvres. The smell of grilling burgers wafted through the air as children darted between adults, their laughter echoing off the shop's brick walls. Ethan stood at the grill, spatula in hand, watching the scene before him with quiet amazement. Just months ago, this kind of gathering would have seemed impossible. Now, here they were. Mechanics chatting with business executives, teachers sharing recipes with wealthy housewives, children playing together without a thought to whose parents drove what kind of car. Need any help with those burgers? Mr. Sterling appeared beside him, rolling up the sleeves of his expensive dress shirt. His tie was loosened, and for once he looked relaxed. "Sure," Ethan replied, handing him a spare spatula. "Just don't tell anyone if I burn one or two." They worked side by side, falling into an easy rhythm. Nearby, Mrs. Thompson from the bank was deep in conversation with Tony, Ethan's best mechanic, about classic cars. The principal sat with a group of parents, some wealthy, some struggling, all discussing ideas for the next school fundraiser. Liam weaved through the crowd, carrying a tray of lemonade cups. He'd grown taller in the past months, but more notably, he carried himself differently now. Gone was the hunched posture and downcast eyes. Instead, he moved with confidence, stopping to chat and joke with everyone he served. "This is quite something you've put together," Mr. Sterling commented, flipping a burger. "I don't remember the last time I saw the town so united." Ethan nodded, thinking of how it all started. "Sometimes it just takes one person brave enough to cross the line," he said, watching as Amelia helped some younger kids set up a makeshift basketball game using an old rim they'd mounted to the shop wall. The late afternoon light painted everything golden, softening edges and casting warm glows on faces. Near the dessert table, Mrs. Master Dashes Pachter Chen from the local diner was teaching a group of society ladies how to make proper Chinese dumplings. They laughed together as their attempts came out misshapen but full of heart. "Dad," Liam called out, running over with Amelia in tow. "Can we start the music now, please?" Ethan glanced at his watch. "Sure thing, buddy. Why don't you two set it up?" They hurried to the small sound system they'd borrowed from the school. Soon, gentle melodies floated through the air, adding another layer of warmth to the gathering. Someone had pushed some tables aside to create a dance floor, and couples began swaying to the music. Amelia's restored Honda Civic sat proudly at the edge of the lot, now adorned with drawings from the shelter kids, their way of welcoming her as their official volunteer driver. She'd cried when Ethan and Liam had presented it to her, understanding it wasn't just a car but a symbol of their shared journey. As the sky began to turn pink and orange, string lights flickered to life overhead, a surprise addition from the hardware store owner. The effect was magical, turning the humble parking lot into something out of a fairy tale. Children chased fireflies, while their parents shared stories and desserts. Liam's voice rose above the general chatter as he began to sing, the same song he'd performed at the fair, but this time without fear or shame. Other voices joined in, creating an impromptu chorus that brought smiles to every face. Mr. Sterling moved away from the grill, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Thank you," he said simply, before walking over to join his daughter, who was teaching some of the shelter kids a clapping game. Ethan watched as the community he'd known his whole life transformed before his eyes. The invisible barriers that had divided them for so long seemed to dissolve under the string lights and shared laughter. A child from the country club played tag with the janitor's son. The diner cook shared her secret recipe with the mayor's wife. As the evening deepened, Amelia and Liam joined Ethan near the grill. Liam's eyes sparkled with joy as he looked up at his father. Amelia's smile held the same warmth it had shown on that first day she'd defended Liam at school. "This is what Mom would have wanted," Liam said softly, leaning against his father's side. Ethan wrapped an arm around his son's shoulders, feeling a lump in his throat. Amelia reached over and squeezed his other hand, her presence steady and sure. Together, they watched as their small act of bridging differences had sparked a transformation larger than themselves. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of purple and gold, casting a magical glow over the gathered crowd. Children's laughter mingled with adult conversation, creating a symphony of community and connection. Rich and poor, young and old, all brought together by the simple power of acceptance and understanding. And in that moment, they all knew no heart was too poor to change the world. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Carter, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.